big painting that I did about just the coronavirus and being shut down and locked down and quarantine and stuff like that. But sometimes some of my paintings are just about like, I really like these pretty colors and I want to see how they work together. So the painting that I'm going to work on today with you is actually a series of 4 paintings that I'm working on. And I'm calling the series The Wolves. And it's about a play that I saw that my daughter was in. So I have an 18-year-old daughter. She's a senior in high school. And as you can imagine, with the pandemic and all the school shutdowns and things like that, it's been a pretty difficult year for her. But this play in particular really dealt with just girlhood and being a teenage girl and some of the things that they deal with, like the ups and the downs, the friends, the boyfriends, school, parents, clothes, just like stuff that you deal with being a teenager. So that is my inspiration for this piece. And when I come to a piece that I want to create and I have a thing that I'm inspired by, I think about the elements of that topic and what those colors feel like to me. So when I think of teenage girlhood and all the struggles and the ups and downs and the highs and lows that they go with, I think of every color, which is perfect for me because when I paint, I like to use every color. So the color palette that I chose today is a lot, so bear with me. But to start off, I just have these 6 basic colors. We've got titanium white, cadmium yellow, a light portrait pink, Payne's gray, a naphthol crimson, and then a turquoise. And then I'm going to add some more colors, but I'll talk about that. So the way I'm going to do this is we've got the blank canvas. We're going to start on that. We're going to paint that acrylic. Then we're going to do something else, another layer. And then we're going to do another layer after that, and then another layer after that. So if you have any questions, I'm going to try to keep up with some of the questions on the chat. If I miss your question, I'm sorry. I'll try to get to them. You can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is @Chantal Stone. And you can send me a DM if you have anything you want to talk about or questions about specific products I'm using, anything like that. So we're going to start off the first layer with acrylic paint. And I really love Utrecht paint. It's a great brand. So I strongly feel that you need to, when you're first starting out with any kind of art medium or project or whatever, get the best quality that you can afford. Because so many times, and I know this happened with me, is I start with kind of a cheap product and I don't get the result that I want. And then I start to doubt myself as an artist and think like, oh my God, I'm terrible. But it's not me, it's just I'm only limited by the ability of the products that I'm using. And so I love Utrecht paint because they're very affordable. They're made in Brooklyn, New York, which I love. I'm a New Yorker at heart. And they're very highly pigmented, both the oil paints and the acrylic paints. So you can add mediums to them, you can stretch them, you can really push these paints to their limits and they'll perform beautifully all throughout. So I have my palette prepared. I like to use, so I've experimented with a lot of different things of what worked for me and what didn't work for me. What I like to use is a disposable palette. So I use the Blick brand disposable palette. It's super easy because I don't like to clean up after myself. So when I'm done with my paint, I just tear the sheet off and throw it away and I'm done. Oops. Okay, so we're gonna go up here. I love the Blick Premier Gallery canvases. This is a 24 by 24. And so this is gonna be the base for our entire painting. And we're gonna do different layers. I have each layer already done. Just because we're only here for an hour and we don't have hours and hours for different layers to dry. So we're going to start off here. This is a splined canvas, which means it's kind of tucked in the back. The canvas is stretched through the stretcher bars and tucked in, and I just like the finished look of that. So these are my favorite canvases to use. So for this layer, I'm going to put a bunch of stuff on top of it after this is dry. So I'm not too concerned with what it looks like. I don't really care. Like for this type of layer, since this is the base layer of what I'm doing, you know, I could leave it blank. I could do all one color. I can do a bunch of different colors. It doesn't matter. And I'm not too concerned with like the structure or the composition or anything. It's just very free form. But when I want to cover a large space quickly, because acrylic paint dries faster than what I'm used to, because I use a lot of oil paint, I like to use a palette knife. So I'm just going to smear some of the paint on there, but I'm getting it all over myself. And I just smear down there. I always have some hand towels and paper towels nearby so I can wipe things off in between. And we're not really concerned with anything being too pretty right now, because I'm just trying to get this canvas covered with paint. So, all right, so there we go. Got a lot of that covered. I'm gonna grab a brush and just kind of fill this in. Put a little bit more paint on here. Just smooth that over. Okay, so I know you guys are on the Blick Creative Community, which is a great Facebook group, and I've been following along and reading a lot of the posts ever since it started. One of the questions I saw recently was about what to do with the edges, like the depth profile of your canvas. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. I like to paint it. Sometimes what I'll do is, as I'm painting, I'll just take a little bit of paint and just go in there and paint the edge. So like whatever this color is just going to come over. And I'm not concerned with these colors mixing together. And then sometimes what I'll do is I'll wait until the painting is complete, and then I'll just take some black paint and go around, or whatever the main primary color is of the painting, and I'll just go ahead and paint the edges. But it doesn't matter. I do like to have that finished edge though. So get some of this yellow in here. Smear some of that. There. Okay, looks a little messy. I might work it a little bit more, or I might leave it just as is. Like I said, it's going to get covered over a couple of times, so not really concerned with if I miss any spot or if anything looks too gross. But let's just talk about brushes really quick, because I'm obsessed with paintbrushes. So working in a Blick store, I get a lot of questions about brushes. People don't know which brushes to choose from because we carry a lot. And what I tell people is that it doesn't matter, like you can use any kind of brush for any kind of paint medium. It's more how you want to paint and the effect that you want to create. So if you like to paint with thick paint and you want a nice strong brush that's going to push that paint around, then you want to use a stiffer brush paint, a stiffer bristle paintbrush. But if you want to paint more realistically and you want to have like some really smooth blending, then you want like a softer bristle brush or even a watercolor brush. Watercolor brushes have very soft, fine bristles to hold that water, but you could definitely use those for oil paint or for acrylic painting. It's up to you. It's what you like. And so I have a little bit of everything, and I use acrylic or watercolor brushes for all mediums. But for the most part, I like a strong, stiff bristle brush. And so these Utrecht Tuscan series brushes are some of my favorites. So I use a lot of those. You'll see that this brush quite a bit. I also really like these Utrecht Manglan ones because they are really soft. I've used these for oil and for acrylic and even for watercolor because they're just soft, but strong enough to move that paint around. They're also really, really well made, and I'm horrible. I don't always like to clean my brushes as frequently as I should. So if I'm going to leave some paintbrushes sitting in some paint thinner or some water overnight or for a few days or whatever, I know that these brushes are going to hold up to my abuse. Okay, so we've got this section done. I'm going to set this aside so it can dry. I have one here that's already done from yesterday. So again, just smeared paint on here, nothing too spectacular, not too worried about any type of competition or composition or anything like that. Just paint on the canvas. So let me move this out of the way because my nail is weird. The next layer that we're going to do, I want to make sure you can see, is on canvas sheets. So we carry these, I'm going to use those brushes again. We carry these canvas pads that's really, really great. Looks and feels like a pad of paper. You can tear it off, but it's actual canvas that's been pre-gessoed, it's pre-primed, it's ready to go. So when I first started painting and really was trying to take my painting seriously, I had a lot to learn, and I didn't really know like what kind of art that I wanted to make, or like I knew I wanted to do abstract, but what type of abstract art? Was it just going to be like a bunch of shapes, or was it going to be more gestural, or, you know, I didn't know that. So I did this 100-day challenge on Instagram, which was super intense. So I did 100 paintings in 100 days. And if you're doing paintings like on canvas, you're going to have a stack of 100 canvases in your house. Like I just didn't have the space for that. So I used the canvas pads, and I have 100 of those. They're inexpensive, and they were just really great to kind of warm up and to explore different techniques and different paints and different things. And I really found my voice as an artist. The best part about it was it did a great job of helping me to create a daily art practice because I forced myself to do it every day. So that was like 6-7 years ago, and I've tried a couple times since then to do the 100-day challenge, and I fail every time. But if you can have the ambition and the stamina to do it, I highly recommend it. And those canvas pads are great. So like I said, I like the stretched canvas, but sometimes I stretch my own when I want a size that's too big to fit in my car, or sometimes I like oddball sizes. So sometimes I'll stretch my own canvas, and then I'll have leftover canvas strips. And I'm a little bit of a hoarder, so I don't want to throw those away. So what I started to do was I would paint on them because I always think like, oh, I could do something with this. So I started painting on them, and then I just had all these like little random oddball pieces of painted canvas. And it just occurred to me that I can add them to other paintings, which you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. But you can also use the canvas pad because it is canvas, and it's inexpensive, so you can do whatever you want to it. So that's what we're going to do today. I have these stapled to my wall. So this is my paint wall in my art studio, but you can paint directly on the pad, or if you have like a masonite board or something like that, you can tape it off on there and just do your painting. But I'm going to do my painting. This is going to be the second layer of our painting today, and I'm going to do that on, I have 2 pieces of the canvas pad right here. So I'm going to use the same colors as the first layer, but I'm just going to add a couple extra colors. I'm going to add a purple and a green to that, just to give it a little bit more variety. Just put those on my... I have a question here. Do you ever frame canvas? I do. I have. And they frame great. So it's just like a piece of paper, really, but it's more flexible. It's not going to tear quite as easily as paper, but you'll see shortly that it does tear pretty easily. And you can frame them. I like to put like just in a regular frame with a mat. It looks great. It really does. Or you can unmat it. Yeah, you can frame it. Okay, so I have pretty much the same colors on here, and then just the added green and the purple. And I don't think for this that I'm going to use the palette knife. I'm going to stick with my brushes. Just sort of haphazardly here with the colors. Again, I'm not too concerned. I'm like maybe 10% more concerned with the structure and the composition, but still more stuff is going to go on top of this, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I know it sounds crazy, but you'll see what I'm talking about when we get to that step. Okay. When I was first doing this project, I was kind of worried about how you see like the dark colors are blending together and looks kind of just dark and I don't know, just dark. But then I was thinking about like the theme, like the subject matter of what I'm painting, like girlhood, being a teenage girl. We do have those dark moments. I know that my daughter and her friends, like they have been through some stuff. So I'm going to leave that in there. There's some white in here. And literally, this is how I paint. I'll end up holding a bunch of brushes at the end. I'll have paint all over myself too. And if I get it on my face, like, that's just a thing that happens. Get some of this green in here. This is a chromium oxide green, which I really love. I'm going to get some of that purple in there too. This is a diazonine purple, which comes out really dark, like it almost looks kind of black in there. But once you add some titanium white to it, just to get this beautiful purple color. All right. There we are with that layer. I'm going to put those in water. So here we go. Thankfully, because this is going to take a little while to dry, I have some done already. So I'm going to take this off and just set it aside. I'm not too worried about mess or anything like that. So I have two sheets that I had painted previously. And these are going to go on top of our painted canvas that we just did. This isn't the one that we just did. Did this one yesterday because it's already dried. But so Let me get this out of the way. So the canvas sheets from the pad, they tear so easily. They're just really fun to use, very versatile. What I'm going to do is tear them up into strips, and then I'm going to adhere these to the canvas, move out of the way, with a matte medium. So you'll see how easily this thing tears. Just like that, like super easy. And there's no rhyme or reason to the tearing. You can tear a bunch of different sizes, a bunch of different pieces, different shapes. And there we go. So we have all of our pieces. We've got our painting. Then I'm going to take acrylic matte medium. So I don't know if anyone, you know, what your knowledge base is on acrylic mediums or anything, but mediums are really great. So what they are is just like basically the acrylic paint without the pigment. So it has like the all the acrylic binders and things in them. And they do a bunch of different things. So you can use them, they have multiple uses. Today, we're going to use them to stick these pieces onto the canvas. So they work like as an adhesive kind of. But you can also use acrylic mediums to stretch your paint a little bit. If you're using, sometimes different brands of acrylic paints dry, like some dry more glossy than other. You can add a matte medium or a gloss medium to try to get some uniformity in the sheen of your paint. You can also use, a more fluid medium to get thinner paint if you want to have like looser, drippier paint, or you can add a thicker, heavier medium. There are heavy gloss mediums, heavy gel mediums. That's got to feel so good. Yes, tearing it apart, it's very, yeah, it feels great. And it's fun too. So thank you for that, because yeah, I do like that. But the mediums, if you go, you can Google it, or you can visit a Blick store, or look on the Blick website and see all the different types of mediums. Some of the thicker, heavier mediums are really great to build texture, almost like sculpture-like, onto your painting. If you want to add texture, you can mix them with your paint and then have that color be the texture that you want. Like if you wanted to build body to the to your painting, or you could just put the blank, like the plain heavy medium onto the canvas and then paint on top of it. So like if you wanted to use oil paint, you could do your acrylic medium on the canvas, let it dry, then put the oil on top. But today, like I said, we're just using the medium as an adhesive to stick to the canvas. So I'm just going to move this stuff out of the way here. And I just have like a basic brush. And then now this is when I'm a little bit more concerned about my composition and where I'm placing these pieces, because it's like I'm putting a painting on top of another painting. So I'm going to be a little bit more thoughtful about where I place these. You know what? I forgot. I should put some gloves on. Because this matte medium, when it dries on your skin, is painful to remove. It's just sticky. Okay. Oh, having a problem with my nail there. There we go. So I live in a really old house with plaster walls. So if you live in an old house with plaster walls, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I like to overlap the strips a little bit. Just smooth it down. I don't know if you can see this on there, but there's like a little string that's left from the frayed part of the torn canvas. You can see that. Sometimes I pull them off, sometimes I leave them there because I just think they add an interesting piece of texture, just a little interesting element to the final painting. Big piece right here. I like to sometimes, like over here, I put the pieces on colors that didn't match what it was placed on top of, but sometimes I like to use the underpainting as a guide for the piece that I'm going to put there. I don't know. It still gets covered because we're going to do more stuff on top of this once all of this is dry. Like a little weird piece right here. The great thing about this technique, like today, I'm using a torn up painting basically, but you could also use like pieces of decorative paper or like pictures that you've collected or anything like that. You can use leaves or anything. Like the matte medium, when it dries, it's so strong that it will literally hold almost anything onto this. Okay, I'll just do a couple of more and then we're going to move on to the next step. A little extra string. So obviously I'm using a matte medium, meaning it's going to dry with a matte finish. You could use a gloss medium if you wanted to, or you could take some gloss and some matte medium and mix them together if you want sort of like a satin finish. But I'm not worried about that. Like to me, for this, the gloss matte doesn't really matter to me because I'm going to put oil paint and stuff on top of this. And then once that dries, I'm going to varnish the final piece. So matte medium is just, it's what I have. I have a lot of it. And so that's what I'm using. But it's really entirely up to you what kind of medium you want to use. Okay, keep an eye on the time. So I'm gonna stop here. I do have a few more pieces that I'm going to adhere to this canvas, but I just want to, for time's sake, move on to the next step. So I'm going to set these aside so I don't lose them, and then move on to the next step. This takes I usually wait about 24 hours before moving on to the next step. It's just how I work. You'll notice over time with your art practice that you'll find what works for you and how you like to work. But I usually have multiple paintings that I'm working on all at once. So I'm going to set this aside and then wait about 24 hours for it to dry. And then we are ready for the next step. So this is one that I did yesterday. So I've got all of my pieces stuck onto here. It's been drying for 24 hours. I don't need the gloves anymore. You can see like I don't know if you can see it with the camera, but there's like a little piece of string right here that's stuck in there. I've got texture from acrylic paint that I didn't put any of the canvas strips on top of because I just had a glob of some white paint right here, but I like that. So I'm leaving that on there. Not going to cover that up. So this next step, before we do the oil painting on top of this, I'm just going to stick that in some water. I like to do a little bit of mark making. So for any type of mark making, you can use anything. You can use like an acrylic paint pen. You can use graphite, like a graphite pencil. You can use charcoal, whatever you want to use. So today I'm going to use, I have the Blick soft acrylics, or I'm sorry, the soft pastels, and I'm just going to make some lines. So I could have done this before the canvas strips, before I stuck those on there, but I like to do it at this step. And so I'm just going to make some lines, nothing too crazy. Couple different colors. It just adds like some movement and some different texture to the final piece. Just gives the eye just a little bit of something extra to look at. And we're, like I said, we're still going to cover that again. I'm going to skip this step for now, but a lot of times what I do before I paint on top, maybe sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't, I'll spray a fixative on top of it just so that this doesn't smudge, because it will smudge a little bit and smear with the oil paint, but I'm not worried about that. Like it does, I only used 2 different colors, white and black, and it won't interfere with the painting too much. So I'm not worried about that. So I have my oil paints already prepared. Okay, so this is my favorite part. Oil painting, I love it. And just like the Utrecht acrylics, I love Utrecht oil paint. Highly pigmented, like they're smooth, they're buttery, they're beautiful, and they perform the way I need them to perform. But I add stuff to it. So traditional oil painters will tell you that what you want to do is, or the only thing that you need to use is like your paint, maybe some linseed oil, and a paint thinner, like a terpenoid or mineral spirits or something like that, which is totally fine. If you are more of a traditionalist in your painting practice, then you can get away with that 100%. For me, because I paint in so many different layers, I don't want to wait several weeks. And I also like to paint really thick sometimes. So I don't want to always have to wait a couple of weeks or however long oil paint straight from the tube or oil paint with added oil to it, however long that takes to dry. I don't want to wait that long. I want to do a layer. I want to move on to it the next day or a couple days later. Excuse me. So what I like to use is an alkyd-based medium. So there are 2 things that Utrecht makes. There's the alkyd glazing gel, and then the alkyd glazing medium, which is smooth and more fluid, and then the alkyd gel, which is stiffer. And so the alkyd gel, all of my paints have already been mixed with the alkyd gel. I like to use that, and I use it for all of my paints. Whenever I start a painting, I'll put out all the colors onto my palette, and then I'll just squeeze out like a little blob of the alkyd gel right on top of the colors and then mix it together. I do like maybe not quite 50-50 because I want to preserve the color quality. I don't want to mix my colors too much, like dilute the colors with any medium too much. So maybe like 1/3. It's, you know, I'm not measuring anything, but I mix all of my paints with an alkyd medium like that, and then they dry. So the painting that I did yesterday, this one right here, it's dry to the touch. I've got paint on my hands from the last step, but this is dry to the touch, and I painted this yesterday. So it still needs, you know, a few more weeks to cure, but with traditional oil painting, they say that you should take like 6 months before your painting is dry enough to varnish. But with any oil painting that you do with an alkyd medium, 30 days, you can varnish your painting. I've done it, if I know that I'm painting very thin, I've done it in 3 weeks. But I don't even varnish all of my paintings. But when I do, it doesn't take that long because all of my paint has an alkyd medium. So for this layer, this is where it gets a little scary because this is the final layer, and I want to be more intentional and a little bit more thoughtful with where I place the paint. I also don't want to cover everything. Like, there's some things in here, like I love this part right in here. I love how the yellow is mixed with the other colors. So I want to preserve that. So I'm going to be a little bit more thoughtful. I kind of want to maybe brighten this area up a little bit. So I'm really spending a lot of time looking at the painting and then thinking where I want it to go. I want it to have all of those elements of girlhood. I'm still thinking about that as I'm painting. So I want there to be softness. I want there to be fun and joy in it, but I also want there to be some tension. Like, if there's a part in the painting that I don't like, that I think is a little ugly, or the colors blend kind of weird, I might leave that in there because that's what being a teenager is like. Like, not all of it is pretty. So because by the time I'm done with the series, I'll have 4 complete pieces. I want all of those pieces to have varying elements of those ideas of being a teenager. So I'm being more thoughtful with my process. This step takes a little bit longer. It's a little bit slower. So I've got my brushes. I also use, just to go off topic just for a second, another Utrecht product that I really like is the oil painting medium. I don't use it quite as much just because the odor is so strong, because it does have some like a turpentine-based thing in it. But I use it sometimes when I want drips, which I like that a lot. But if I want really loose, drippy painting, I'll use that. But I can also use some of the alkyd medium, which I put in this cup already. And then to clean my brushes, I use the Utrecht odorless paint thinner. Odorless is perfect. And it just gets all the gunk and the oil paint out of your brushes. So we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. Some painters, probably better ones than me, will tell you that you want to have a separate set of brushes for your acrylic paint and a separate set of brushes for your oil paint, which is probably good advice because the brushes that you use for oil paint do like get some of that residue of your paint thinner and stuff in them. I don't always adhere to that because I have one place where I store all of my brushes, so I don't have anything labeled. It is not wrong to mix your brushes like that. It's just, I'm not going to use the brushes that I painted with acrylic today on oil paint today. So I do have a lot of brushes and I try to keep them separate, but once they're all washed and cleaned, they all go back in the same place on the shelf. Okay, so one of the things that I really love in any of my paintings, whether it's, you know, I have an idea or a theme that I'm trying to explore, or if I'm just exploring pretty colors, is I love dark and I love light. So this piece in particular, to me, I see more dark than I do light. So I'm going to focus on the lighter areas just to bring those up. I have on my palette the paints already mixed together, but I do want some, like I have a cadmium yellow medium right here. I want something lighter. So I'm going to mix it with the titanium white, and I tend to mix right on the canvas. Some people will mix their colors very precisely on their palette. I don't do that. That's just not how I work. I work very intuitively. I try to be a little bit slower and more intentional, especially in my final steps, but I really just kind of go for it and then try to figure out what I allow the painting to tell me where it's going to go. All right, so let's get started. So I'm going to mix some yellow and some white, and I'm going to do it right here. I just want to brighten this up a little bit. And I don't know if you can see this in here, but right in here, I've got like some pink and some red and some yellow just smeared together. I love that. And I don't know what it is about those colors. So people who know me know that I will like lose my mind over a certain color and I'll be obsessed with it for a few weeks and then I'm on to the next color. But right now, the thing that I love is pink and red and yellow mixed together because I kind of think they, like normally I would never wear an outfit with those colors mixed together. But when I see it in a painting, oh, so good. So I'm just going to be mindful not to cover that part because I really love that. Okay. Like as you saw before with my acrylic painting, I end up using a lot of brushes because I'm in the moment and I'm painting and I don't want to have to think about things too much other than what I'm painting. So I try to use a different brush for every color. I usually start off that way, and then by the end of it, I'm just using one brush and it gets kind of messy, but that's okay. Get some of this red in here, really brightens it up a little bit. But I love like this dark purple and this red in here. I don't want to cover that up, so I'm just gonna go like that. And I love like these blues and greens and the turquoise. So I'm just gonna put more of that right on top of it. And it just, by painting on top of a painting like this, when I have so many different pieces that are, it's just doing a lot, by using the same color palette, but just on top of little blobs of little mini paintings, it just gives it more cohesion. Start to cover that up a little bit, not too much. I love to mix the colors like just on the canvas. just let it be kind of a mess. Like when you have different colors on the canvas and then a different color on your paintbrush, and you just kind of mix them together, that just does it for me. Stuff like that, I love. I definitely still want to keep those dark elements in there again because, like I said earlier, being a teenager is just dark and scary, and I just deal with a lot more than what I dealt with when I was in high school. I know that. Okay, so I probably have the surface about 60% covered with oil paint. This is the part where I'd like to stop and kind of sit with it and see where it needs to go. See, like I really think I want to do something more in here, but I like to live with it. I don't want to overpaint. I don't want to cover stuff up, like little areas that I really love. Like I love this. I just like this center part right in here. But again, with that intentionality of the final piece, I just want to slow down a little bit and not just throw all the paint on there and hope for the best. So I'm going to take this one down. And this here is the oil piece that I worked on yesterday. So like I said, I used a lot of or not a lot, but a good amount of the alkyd medium. So I'm dry to the touch. I can touch this. I don't have to worry about anything smearing or getting on my hands. But I can look at it, and then this is where I can decide if I want to add more to it, or maybe the painting is done. Like to me, when I was painting yesterday, I mixed a lot of the yellow and the red together, so it's kind of orangey in here, which at first I didn't know if I like that, but now I'm thinking it creates some of that weird tension that goes along with being a teenager. So I think I might keep that, but I do want to add a little bit more white to it. So I'm going to get a smaller brush. Maybe just add some, just kind of lighten up different areas. And again, I'm mindful of the areas on here that I didn't want to cover up. So like this is all acrylic in here that I really enjoyed. There's like this piece right here. This is just all acrylic, so I don't want to go with any oil paint on top of that. Same with here, same in here. I want to keep those elements, so I just have to be mindful to not overpaint, because I will overpaint something. piece right there. So this is coming out pretty good. Don't know if I'm going to call it done yet. I'm going to live with it for a little while. But I think you get like kind of the idea of how I do it. I could just keep painting it, and then I end up overpainting it. Okay, so I'm going to stop there just for a second because I'm going to talk about another thing, another technique that I like to use a lot. So back to when I'm building my oil painting palette, I've squeezed all the colors onto the palette. I've added some of the alka gel medium to it. I've mixed those together. I'm ready to paint. I also always have a little cup. I just have a stack of these little plastic cups of the alka glazing medium, because sometimes, especially since I paint in layers and I allow a layer to dry before I move on to the next step, I like to preserve an area, but I want to cover it up just a little bit with some transparency. So if I take the glazing medium, I can create a gel, like a glaze with the whatever color I want to use by just using a tiny bit of paint and mixing it with this. Sometimes I do it right on the brush or right on the palette or even right on the canvas, and I'll just smooth it over, and then I get that really cool transparency. So that's one of the really great things about using different mediums, whether they're oil mediums or acrylic mediums, is you get a lot of versatility that you can do and to create the kind of effects that you want to create. Just a few things about oil painting. So in oil painting, like there are rules that you may have heard of, like fat over lean. So what that means is it has to do with how oil paint dries. So like acrylic paint is water-based, so it dries through evaporation, but oil paint oxidizes, so the drying method is different. So fat over lean means that you want to have your oily, like more oily paint on your top layers. I use I'm sorry, I have a question. What kind of glazing medium? It's the Utrecht alka glazing medium. You can find it on dickblick.com. But there's also a page that I think will be posted right underneath this video that shows a lot of the products that I'm using. You can find it there. So, but with fat over lean, in my painting practice, I don't worry about that too much because I'm never adding any extra oil to my paints. And because of the way that I mix any alkyd medium that I'm using with my paint, it's pretty uniform throughout all the colors and all of the layers. And because I also paint in layers, like I'll do a layer, wait a day, do another layer, wait a day. The dry time is pretty consistent throughout. So the fat over lean thing, I don't worry about that. I've never had a painting crack. I've probably in the last 5 years that I've been oil painting, have done hundreds of paintings, and I've never had anything crack. So I just don't worry about it. But if you want to explore more traditional, another question. Do you recommend applying the glaze with a brush or a spray? You're going to do it with a brush. I'm not sure you can do it with a spray. I suppose if you loosen it up enough, you can put it like in a spray bottle or whatever, but you're going to use a brush. But if you're talking about varnish you can do with a brush or a spray varnish. Personally, I prefer a spray varnish, but a lot of people, it's just a personal preference thing. But back to the fat over lean, with the alkyd mediums that I use, that's not really a concern that I have. Just don't worry about that. It's just one thing. I really like to just sit in the mindset of creating the art. I don't want to have to think about science and stuff behind that. So the way that I paint works for me, but you should explore what works for you. Also, another oil painting rule is thick over thin. So a lot of oil painters will do their base layer with a very thin paint, possibly allow that to dry, you don't have to, and then do a thicker layer on top. That also has to do with the oxidizing, I can't say oxidation, of how it dries. But again, sometimes I'll use, so like for this painting, we had an acrylic base layer and then allowed that to dry and then put oil on top of that. I probably paint that way about 50% of the time. And then sometimes I'll just go straight oil paint, like there's no base layer. I'm just throwing paint on the canvas and going for it. So again, when you explore these different mediums, there are a lot of rules when it comes to oil painting, but once you understand them, you can know what rules you actually need to follow and which ones you can get away with breaking, I guess. But we are almost out of time. Been trying to keep track, trying to pace myself. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. It was a lot of fun. I am going to continue working on these paintings and then I will eventually post them onto my Instagram. If you follow me, at Chantal Stone, and I hope you guys learned a lot. Visit your local Blick store. If you don't have one near you, then go to dickblick.com. But I know if you live in Columbus, definitely come see us because we have a lot of great artists that work in our store. So we hope to see you soon. So I'm going to keep on painting. And then also, if you're in Columbus, come to my art show in June. I will be posting that stuff on my Instagram as well. Then you can see these things in person. But I'm going to work on them a little bit more. I think this one is probably about 90% done, maybe 95% done. I'm going to live with it a little bit, and then I'm going to play with it some more. Okay? So thanks, guys. It's 6 o'clock. It's been a great hour. Really enjoyed this. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.